Okay, you want me to start on? We want to talk about a topic that we've talked to you about in the past, but we still see that a lot of work needs to be done in this area. And we could head this lesson by how to work with an older member, how a younger member works with an older member. And we see examples all the time of how you want to work with an older member, but when you're working with an older member, you make a mess of it. And not intentionally, but just by eagerness or getting excited. Or, for example, when we brought this fan in yesterday, and I asked a couple of people to help put it together. And then 10 minutes later, I was regretting that I had asked for help, because the help that I asked did not help, even though they were trying to help. And before I go any further, I want to know if you can tell me why they didn't help. You didn't have to be present. You didn't have to observe that circumstance. I'm trying to see if you can see why I think that they were not helpful, even though I know they were trying to be helpful. I'm just going to ask you the question, Andrew.
Was it because they initiated things and didn't follow your lead as a older member?
Well, that's true, but they didn't really think they were initiating things. And they actually thought they were following my lead. So let's go a step further, Emily.
Could it be that their brains were thinking the next step?
Well, I wish that's all it was. But that's part of it. You understand what Pam Moody's saying? That their brains were thinking, well, maybe we could be doing this, or maybe we ought to put this washer there first, or did we drop this on the floor, or did we... Now, what was being said was, would you have us do this? Could we do that? Now, how can you work with an older member? How should you work with an older member? If an older member comes in and says, I would like for you and you to work with me on a task. Is that right?
Wait until the older member gives instructions on what to do.
Yes. Now, this is very easy to say and very hard for many of you to do. And yet it's a very important lesson, because you're really going to be like a restless puppy who wants to be helpful, but is just making so many waves that the older member will wish that he hadn't asked your help, even though he knows you really want to help. So the trouble is, can you do it? We know that we can sit and talk about it, but when you actually get to the circumstance, can you do it? Like if I say, Janodi and Sunodi, would you help me do this task? And they say yes, then they should come up, and that's it. They don't say anything else. They don't think anything else. Now, that's easy to do at the first, waiting for the first instruction. But usually the first instruction stimulates ideas about how to proceed with the next step, and how to proceed with the next step and the next step. And also, when you work with your classmates as check partners, you're trying to say, can we do this, or shall I proceed with that? You're saying to your check partner. And a lot of you've gotten in the habit of trying to do that in the right way, and yet your mouth is saying one thing, but your brain is vibrating something else. Your mouth is saying, what do you think about doing this, or can we do this, when your brain is saying, I think this is a good idea. Now, in doing the fan task, there was so much psychic confusion going on, if I can use psychic in that way, mental waves of confusion going on, that a very simple task became a mess. We lost things. My thinking was just destroyed because of all the help I was getting. And yet, it wasn't help. Now, we could tell you in the last 2 or 3 days a half a dozen similar circumstances to that, where we have asked for help. Now, it's so difficult to keep your mind quiet and your willingness alert, and to keep your mouth quiet, and then not to extend beyond what the next level asks, or what an older member would ask you to do. If they say, take that and do this, then you don't say, oh, and now would you like me to do this? It has to stop exactly where the instruction stopped, both mentally and physically. Unless you're doing repetitious things, and they say, do you want to do that to all of those there? Then you simply do that to all of those, and you don't go beyond that point. And even when you're through doing that, you don't say, now what can I do? As soon as you've stopped, in other words, you're acting just like a robot that is programmed to do those things, and when that program runs out, it's in a period of wait for the next program. But it isn't programmed when it runs out of what it's been assigned to do, to say, what would you have me do next? Or could I do this? Or could I do that? And I don't know, maybe T can help me on this. I can't think of ways that we can help you drive this home, because we know that your heart is in the right place. And Dan Sody, I've just pumped Dan Sody for questions, or I pumped him with questions about what transpired over at the packing plant, where they were trying to take some things over there. And I learned that he got all of sorts of unsolicited help. Now you could say, well, now what role does Dan Sody play? He's not an older member. In a sense, in that task, he had been in contact with Lynx. He had received instruction from Lynx, and he was getting some others to go and help him. And he was in the lead position. And it would have been right for him to take the lead, since Lynx asked him to do it, and for him to get some helpers. For him to take the lead and say, let's do this, and let's do that, and let's do the other. And not one of his helpers should have voiced any suggestions of help, or even said, would you have me do this? That throws kinks in it. Or what do you think about this? And Dan Sody has to, in that position, all he can do is say, let's do this, let's do this. Now, if he gets to the point where he doesn't know what the next step is, and he solicits your help and says, Sam Modi, what do you think about this? You've got to very, very carefully not let that open the door for your exercising your opinion beyond just the little area that he's asking you about. That doesn't mean that he has opened the door for your suggestions for the rest of the 3 hours or whatever time it was that you were working there. And a lot of you don't know how much your mouths are going at tasks like that, and your brain. Like when I was working with Kadoti and Sam Modi here with the fan, and Jim Modi and Lagodi, there were constant little comments coming from all directions the whole time. And I didn't want to be offensive or have feelings hurt and say, I'm sorry I asked you all to help, so get out here and let me finish it on my own. But I know that I could have done what we had to do in a third of the time by reading instructions and doing it myself. by myself. But we want to involve you in working with older members so that you can have experience in being there. Just being there is all the help that you need to offer. You don't need to say, can I do this or can I do that or what would you have me do now? All that throws confusion in. You don't even need to say, I'm finished with that you gave me to do. Because the older member is going to recognize that you have finished or ask you, have you finished that task? If you're back there standing there, they're going to assume that you have finished that task, or you wouldn't be standing there as if you're waiting for something more to say. But even for you to say, I'm finished with that task, you might as well say, what would you have me do next? And you're interrupting what they're in the process of doing at that moment. In other words, they know in the peripheral vision of their thinking that you are through and that you're ready for further instruction, or you wouldn't be there. And they'll ask you, did you complete that task? Did everything go okay? And then if they say nothing more, then you don't think, well, is there something else I can do? Or what would you have me do now? But even 100% worse than that is, how about, can I do this now? Assuming that that's going to be one of the next things that they have in mind to do. Now, a lot of you, as you work in the lab, the fiber lab, and as you work with your crews, you abuse these same things. So it extends not only as with an older student with an older member, but it extends to your work with your fellow classmates. Because you say one thing, but you mean another. Well, you don't even always say it right. A lot of times you'll say, how about our doing this? And you might as well have said, I want to do this. And they have to go along with you or buck you. Or if you're a little bit more right about what you're saying, you might say, what do you think about our doing this? But you really are saying, I would like to do this. I hope you'll agree with me. And a week doesn't pass that we don't get dozens of notes of conflict, of cooperation, and working together on just this basis within crews in every department of your craft. And we would like to be able for you to work smoothly in this way, and for you to also be able to work with an older member smoothly in this way. But all of you need to consciously do some significant homework in this area and test that homework days in a row. In other words, when next time you go on duty in the lab, you go in there with caution already there, saying, I am not going to get my ideas about how I want this to happen. And when I say something, I am going to mean, does this look like the right thing here? Or what do you think we should do now? And I'm going to mean that I'm not going to push my ideas off in a subtle way or a direct way. Now, believe it or not, even if you do what you think might have been the wrong action by using the proper procedure, there's always a way to get that action back on the track. And you are safer in the development of your conduct by having stuck to the right procedure. Can you follow that? Did everybody follow that? I'm not sure you did. Okay. Let's say that I'm following the right procedure, even though my brain was trying to con me into saying, I think that we ought to do, that this is what ought to be done first. But by following the procedure, we did it we did it a different way. And what we're saying is, even if the different way was less than what you thought was the right way, even according to Link, but you did the procedure correctly of looking to each other and working that way together, there's always a way to get you back on the track with the right action. But there isn't a way to correct your ill conduct. Now, can you follow that? Because the ill conduct is when you suddenly become so stubborn and so intent that I know how Link wants this done, or I know what the procedure is. And said, don't we all want to do what the procedure is? The procedure's thus and so, isn't it? You know? So now, first of all, we've taught you not to have that kind of faith in yourself. That kind of faith in your memory. If all of you have not learned that your memory is not to be trusted, then you're very tardy in that way. Because your memories are not to be trusted. And we're not excluding anyone. So you have to accept the fact that the next level has procedures that you work by that take into account the fact that your memory cannot be trusted. And these procedures, I'm not talking about the written down procedures in the book as much as I'm talking about the procedures of how you work with others. But some of you have so strongly in mind the procedure written down in the book that you're working with someone becomes an agonizing experience. Because all you're doing the whole time you're supposed to be working with them is pushing that idea that you think is the interpretation of what's in the book regarding this task. Now, this does not mean that you approach the procedures sloppily, or that you do anything other than what you think is in the book. And it does not mean that it is wrong to say, goodness, I thought that the procedure was so-and-so to your task partner. And if your task partner is where they ought to be, they're not going to go a step further because they're afraid they're going to make a mistake. Because just the fact that you questioned it, they're not going to go a step further until the consensus is that it's the correct way to move. If you can't run check the procedure, and the consensus feels that that the right procedure is, then you should go with it. Now, let's say that you have gone with it, but you still thought it was wrong, that it was not what Link's intended. In other words, the minority, you felt like you as a minority were right, and the other crew members were wrong. What do you do? Dorothy?
You take a write a note and tell them what's happening and about what's
Absolutely. You don't make waves in that circumstance. You can't do anything except, you can't go beyond saying, goodness, I thought the procedure was so-and-so. If you go past that, you're breaking a number of rules. One is you're trusting that you're the only person who knew what was right. And secondly is you're putting all your classmates down, because if you said I thought the procedure was so-and-so, you're assuming that they all want to do what's right. They don't just want to buck you. They want to do what's right, and if they proceed in spite of what you've said, then you should assume that they're doing what's right. And then to just question yourself on why you got the wrong notion about it, you go check out the procedure when the opportunity presents itself. If you found out that the procedure was not carried out the way you felt it was to be carried out, you write nothing. And it is corrected. But if we don't stick to this routine, we do not know how to work together. And this is simple, basic, hello, how are you, to the next level. This is the absolute basic minimum courtesy in the next level. And your minds know it. Not one of you here does not have, let's say, every one of you here, your next level mind knows that this is the way to proceed. That it's simply the vehicle's habit of questioning or bucking or initiating too much or making comments that are only muddling the water that you have to put a check on. I think, did you start to say something?
Well, I'd like to add something, and that is to what Doug just said about your mind knows it. If we don't set up a vibration for the mind to come in where it's a pleasant environment, the mind will not come in. You know what I mean?
Just like I couldn't fight off with the fan. In other words, it was unpleasant to my next level mind, so my next level mind receded, and I felt like a clumsy person that couldn't do a simple task.
In a sense, the next level mind is kind of chicken, for the right kind of way. It backs off and lets your vehicle handle those bad vibrations.
That's right.
So, I think, and if you don't set up the vibration right, your mind will reset.
Recede.
Recede. And so therefore, you want to keep the vibration where your mind is always with you. And that way you will accomplish something. Excuse me. You won't have, you will not be able to accomplish what you accomplish if you don't train the vehicle how to do these things. Now, coming over here, Doug was telling me about something we heard on TV, and we don't want to go into it because we don't want to confuse you. But a human was talking about something on their level, and but it is a very for a human to pick up on it is pretty good. But it's also something that we feel like you all may have forgotten to do, or maybe you didn't know that you were capable of doing it. And that is when you get into a spot, into a bind, or into a predicament, or into some kind of a corner where you don't know how to get out of, all you have to do is ask your next level mind. That's true, your next level mind is talking to your next level mind.
Through the vehicle.
Through the vehicle. In other words, the vehicle isn't going back. But you're going to try to bring it to the surface and say to it, next level mind, how can I get out of this circumstance? How can I handle this circumstance? And your next level mind is going to answer you. It's going to show you with an idea or with some kind of action. Now, if all of you are doing this, then the problems would be solved very quickly. But you have to put it into motion. It will not happen on its own. Now, the ones of you who have an out-of-craft hand, if you get into a circumstance you don't know how to get out of it, speak next level mind, speak to the next level mind. And we're not talking about speaking to anybody in the evening.
Or speaking to other members. You're talking to
you're talking to yourself.
Next level mind.
Your next level mind is saying, how can I handle this circumstance? And you've got to stop and think. In a sense, this mind control, this silver mind control, was picking up on things like this. I don't know enough about it to know if it's 100% right. But they ask a question and they wait for an answer. Now they don't know what you know. They don't know what is happening with you because it isn't happening with them. But believe it or not, it happens just as well in humans as it does with you all.
Because they're asking their genes.
Right. Now, you're asking, you're directing the show. You are directing your vehicle. I mean, your next level mind is speaking through the vehicle to the next level mind. You're talking to yourself. It's as simple as that. But that's the only way you can get an answer from the next level mind. And it really isn't a psychotic condition when you talk like that. It's really about the only way you can do it.
Someone who knows this, and turn where it's on slower speed, because the air is really burning my eyes. Just if we could just slow it down just a tiny bit. Is there a way to get it to slower speed?
Yeah, so I think
That's slower speed. Looks like it is.
yeah.
Okay. Let me go back and repeat some of what T said, and then she might want to pick up some more on it. But let's say that you are working on a weakness that you have, like where you think you, in spite of everything you've tried, you can't get control of being out of place, or speaking out of place, or saying the wrong things, or giving out the wrong vibrations. So let's say that you have worked and worked and worked on that weakness, whatever the weakness is. You can treat it the same way of what T is talking about. You can say to your next level mind, okay, next level mind, I've worked like a slave trying to correct this, so I'm going to give it to you. You're saying to your next level mind, I'm going to give it to you. Now you tell me how to correct this weakness. And then your next level mind will tell you step by step little hints on how to correct the things that you are at fault with.
It won't speak to you.
I'm talking about your next level mind, just like it always does. Yes, these are just ideas coming into your little thoughts. Now, but the test is, when it gives you those thoughts, those steps that you have to take in order to correct it, you have to be willing to take those steps. Do you follow what we're saying? Because it's not going to give you one big blob. Your next level mind is not going to give you one big blob on something that may be a major weakness with you, and you can do it all. It will come back very practically with one thing at a time, and then you have to apply it. Now, just the way your next level mind will work. And so let's understand that your next level mind is saying through the vehicle to your next level mind, help me in this area. And then when, and it may not even give you any hints or help right then, but you may get a notion the next time you're in the shower, or you may get a notion when you wake up, or you may get a notion the next time you're approaching that task that you seem to fumble so in. And if you don't listen to that notion that your next level mind is feeding you and do it, then you're spinning your wheels. You weren't sincere when you asked your next level mind.
Now, what you want to do is don't forget what you have asked your mind. You know what I mean? If you're in a lab and you're trying to figure out you've asked your next level mind to give you a solution on something, how to handle something. If you aren't shown anything at that time, because at the time you ask something, you might be in an impossible circumstance. And the only way out is just to evaporate. you know what I mean? You just have to do nothing. And so when you leave the lab, when you get through that circumstance, then you keep that in mind. How could I have handled that circumstance better? Next level mind, show me this. Now, you have to want to know how, sincerely want to know how. Otherwise, it's just asking for something with no force behind it. And in other words, you can do it because Link has asked you to do it. Or you can do it because you want to get out of that. Really learn how to handle a circumstance like that. Or you really want to learn how to overcome a weakness that you have.
Can I say something on this? When you have asked for help on of your next level mind on this area, a lot of time your next level mind will start showing you a different perspective, a different way of looking at the problem. And that's where you get in trouble, because you're so in the habit of looking at it the way that you have been looking at it and not been able to succeed in correcting it. In other words, a lot of the times the reason you can't correct it is because of the way you see it. The perspective you have of it, you're seeing it in the wrong way. You're evaluating it in the wrong way. You're in a sense, you're judging it. You're sizing it up as you see it. And if you stick to that way of sizing it up, that evaluation of it, or that perspective, then as your next level mind feeds you a new perspective, and you stick to the old perspective, then you won't be clear-headed. You won't be in a position to be receptive to the change as the change comes. Can you understand that? And believe it or not, it's a very, very common illness of your vehicle to be convinced that the perspective it has of something is the right judgment and perspective of that weakness or that circumstance. And being willing to change it. So knowing this, if I were in your shoes, if I was Jan Odie and I came upon one of these spots and I said to my next level mind, I want you to show me how to correct this, I would have to follow it up, and I'm willing to change my perspective. I want to change it. In other words, I've got to think that. And I've got to mean it. Because as those ideas come back from my next level mind, I've got to be willing to drop that repetitious thing in the vehicle's computer that's going to come back, sizing it up in a certain way. The conflict is always the vehicular computer. In other words, you ask the next level mind something, the vehicle says, I'll answer it, I got an answer, and it gives you a wrong answer. And but you buy it. You're foolish. You buy the vehicle's answer. And you have respected the vehicle, and you have heard it give you that answer so many times on that particular area that you're convinced that that is the right answer to that question. Sure.
You know how you can tell when it's your vehicle talking? Any of it?
It's very insistent.
Very persistent.
And insistent. That's right.
And it is almost demanding.
Yes.
You can almost feel a force come in and say,
This is it.
and that's when your vehicle is talking.
You'd think we were familiar with that.
Would it also be a way that I've done it before?
Oh, yeah,
Oh, well,
sure.
that's
So
all
that-
humans. That's human talk.
That's
I've
the
done it
vehicle.
before, and this is where we did it in the North Craft and the South Craft.
Oh, boy.
I mean, by now you all ought to know these human little sayings. Also, I can't stand the way that person does things. They've always, ever since I've known them, that's the way they've handled these things. Isn't that human talk?
Well, the vehicle is
That's not the man
talking.
talking. What are some others? And y'all just
Don't let them.
expose them all.
Yeah.
Because when somebody says it to you, I start laughing at them. And say, oh, this is here. Humans here, that's what it is.
Even when you hear those replays from your own vehicular tapes, you ought to start laughing at them.
Another one is, they mean well. They mean well, you know, which we know everybody sitting here means well. If a human came in and sat down with us, we wouldn't believe that he means well, because he's a human. But everybody here means well. You know what I'm saying?
We even know that they mean well, that humans mean well, at a different level. At a different level. Well, I'm not saying all of them, okay? But I'm saying that even the well-meaning ones, the best they know, just like this little man that T was talking about, he was saying, like, if you have a problem with your wife that you can't resolve, then, you know, he was saying, then you've got to face it. You've got to let it be exposed. You've got to search and see if everything in your life is exposed. Everything that's not within the Lord's will. Now, this is, of course, the way the human would look at it. But you're looking from a totally different perspective. But what she said a moment ago is right. This little human was very, very much in tune, because he was preaching everything about you has to be exposed. And you've got to zero in on the things that, as they expose themselves, you've got to zero in on them and correct them.
And this is what we've been talking about for a long time. Right? So he is, some of the work has been picking up on it. Okay, now, before we get too far away from what we originally began to talk about, I'd like to add a couple of things, and that is when you're working with an older member, you've got to go in when you're working with an older member with a mind that is completely clear of any suggestions, and you're looking totally to him for direction.
And you've got to keep it that way.
And you've got to keep it that way. And as
That's
you
the
do
hard
one thing, you don't say, would you like for me to do this? Or, in other words, you don't want to jump the gun, because the next level, the member of the next level, the older member, may be getting ready to say that, and if you say that to them, it's almost, it isn't proper to do it that way.
They're almost forced to not do it, even though it was the right thing to do, and they were about to put it in motion. But to try to help you correct your ill-manneredness of jumping the gun on them, they many times will opt not to do it, just to try to help you. Because if they do what you suggest, then it feeds the vehicle. And the vehicle thinks, well, I came up with a good idea this time, so, and the next level bought it, so why not keep on coming up with ideas?
You know, the next level is different than the human kingdom. The next level does not thrive on ideas. You know what I mean by that? They do thrive on ideas coming from older members. But you don't make marks in the next level by coming up with the most ideas. Which is really good in a way, because there's no competition. You're not competing there. You're performing according to the way members of the next level are the way they are. Did I say that right? And if you perform properly, then you're making marks. But if you're not performing right, then you just don't do anything. You just don't have anything to do until you learn how to do it. Now, like Doug said a minute ago, you all know these things, but you are not old enough in the next level to know it totally. Because it seems to be the biggest problem that we have here in this craft. In other words, it's very difficult for you all to work together as a team. Some of you probably can work very well together, but some of you can't work together very well. And therefore, I feel like what you all knew in the next level, you didn't cover this particular thing very well. You understand what I'm saying? In other words, you weren't proficient at it, and you need to work at it in a more concentrated form. Either that, or you have allowed your vehicle to perform more than getting your minds into your vehicle.
Let the vehicle performance be in front of the mind's performance, like being ahead of it, being dominant.
Now, some of you might be confused sometimes when T or Do may come back with when you suggest something, and we come back and say, no, we don't want to do that. And you, in your mind, you might think, oh, I wonder what was wrong with that idea. There probably wasn't anything wrong with the idea. Only the way you handled it yourself. And so therefore you've got to examine yourself if they do that to you and see, what did I do wrong? And even question it so much. If you can't come up with the answer, then write to Link and say, what did I do wrong? How did I handle that particular circumstance? Did I not do it right? Or how could I have handled it better? I feel like something was wrong with it. You want to question yourself. Even with your classmates, you want to question yourself. The other day, in the past couple of days, I've talked to a couple of different individuals, and each time their response was more of a, was not proper for you at this stage. Now, an example of that is usually when we talk to factory people, we talk to two people, and one person said something, and the other person said, answered it, corrected that person. Instead of saying, in other words, that person, the second person, corrected it with the idea in mind that they were right and the other person was wrong.
In other words, one says it was so-and-so, and the other one said, oh, no, it was...
And instead of saying, I could be wrong, and honestly believing that they could be wrong, but I think it was this.
Or let's say that Pam Modi said there were 13 heads of cabbage brought in, and Sarah Fody feels very strongly that it was 12. Sarah Fody's response should be to not trust that it was 12, and to say, I thought it was, I'm probably wrong, but I thought it was 12. And that would have been right. But the thing that's wrong at the core of the thing is if she honestly trusts that she counted it, and Pam Modi was so sloppy in her counting that she counted 13, and I know that I counted 12. I mean, to think that. You have to think that, or you wouldn't come back with, oh no, it was so-and-so. It's still trusting your memory and your judgment. Plus, you're not talking like a member of the next level.
I'm personally more apt to believe the first person rather than the second one. Because the first one I felt like had his or her mind in at the time, where the second one, the vehicle was talking.
Or it wouldn't have even spoken
See
that
what
way.
I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Which, even though the information may be correct,
Right.
but what you want to do is to treat your classmates in the way that you would treat me. You want to make this craft, and any craft that you're in while you're on this garden, one that has the vibrations of a next level craft. And the only way you can do that is to keep the humanness out of it. Try to perform as with your mind, doing the little things that you do around the craft in the way that you think that members of the next level would do it. And by all means, let a light go off in your head whenever Lynx asks you to do something, because at that time you're being tested. Not for how well you can put a fan together, but how well can you do it as a member of the next level. Now, I have worked with some, I used whenever we were going around working on the things, I felt like they handled it very, very well as members of the next level. And in other words, they listened to, and I felt like they really wanted to know what I wanted them to do. They didn't come in with ideas already planned on how they were going to do it. And this is what you want to hear older members saying about you after you have done a task with them. This is what you thrive on, knowing that you have done good. Anytime we see or hear something about what we have talked to you about and you have been working on, we feel good about it, because it's like saying we are doing a good job. We are doing our work. Even though it's a slow process, it is happening. And once in a while, the next level, just like this weather thing, I firmly believe that the next level had the opportunity to do this thing for me tonight, like a fun thing. Because according to the weatherman, the weather wasn't even supposed to hit this way. And it happened within 20 minutes. And maybe less. I really didn't time it. But it happened very quickly. And
it wasn't 5 minutes after you said that lightning started showing outside our craft.
And the thing of it is, they can do things like that. They can play with you once in a while if they are in range where they can do it.
If it doesn't interfere with what they're doing.
And believe it or not, they have a sense of humor, and they do have fun once in a while. But the most important thing is if you will keep in mind that your next level mind is what we're trying to get in, and trying to make the characteristics of the vehicle receive and to evolve totally.
I want to get the benefit of this lesson we had today, because it's a good one, about this moving task, and I wanted to try and see when the call was being made to Lynx to give an evaluation of the circumstance that was there. And I don't exactly know what you wanted, because you talked to the person, that key person was on the task, and I was standing there listening, and we talked among the four of us what we could do with this. Could we get all that stuff in? Two people felt like that we could. Maybe. They felt pretty optimistic that we could get maybe all of it in there except for a couple pieces, or maybe even get that in there. And the other two felt like, no, I don't think you can get more than 2/3 of it in there. You can try it anyway.
Okay. I'll stop you, because I think, first of all, I think that you all didn't follow procedure of letting Dan Sody take the lead, and because you should have had no opinions about it, period, unless he solicited those opinions from you. If he's because we had asked Dan Sody to evaluate it. Now, if he felt like he couldn't evaluate it, and he said what you think, then he still should take it with a grain of salt, having heard what you think, and still trust his own mind better since the next level asked him to evaluate. Next level didn't say, Dan Sody, see what the others think and see what they come up with. As soon as I heard from Dan Sody that the others had expressed their opinion, I had to buck it. I don't know why, but that's the way my next level mind made me do it and say, let's be optimistic. And let's not accept that it can't be done. And at that point, I didn't care whether you got them all in there or not. But what I did care was that you approached the task as if you could, and that you stopped exercising your own thinking. Now, you're having a hard time dealing with that, or your vehicles could have a hard time dealing with that at times. That doesn't mean that we're asking you to bust up the bunks and take your axe out and tear things up in order to shove them in that space. You better not, because the instructions said no damage.
I'm afraid there was a lot of things that damaged.
All of you, I don't like to hear that.
I could be wrong.
Do you agree with that, Vincent?
I'm sure it's not a lot, and maybe you can give some examples.
Well, one of the mattresses was shoved in to where the door came around and grabbed the edge of it, and it's pinched in between the door to close it. And several of the chairs were pushed up to where they came in contact with that metal wire and got scraped. And then one of the chairs has the leather torn on it, not the leather, but the vinyl torn on the front of it. And some of the painted bunks, the end pieces, things were put on top of them that I couldn't see how to.
Well, see, I can't buy your story. I can't buy it. I'm not even going to buy it now.
Okay.
Now, I'll buy that damage has been done. But I will not buy that damage had to be done.
Okay.
Even that it had to be done by trying to get those things in there. I can't buy that. You follow what I'm saying?
Sure.
Because I don't believe that had to be done. And you may be seeing it in an exaggerated way, that damage. I hope you are. But Danzo did get instruction that we were not to try to get things in to the expense of damage. But that still has to be his assessment. That can't be yours. Now, if Dan Soda is saying, let's try to get all this in there, and his helpers then start moving in a way of saying, well, if we got to get all this in there, then I will get all this in there, and they start doing damage, then it's not Dan Soda's fault for trying to get those things in there. You see what we're saying? It's the fault of the ones who are helping, who have shifted into a gear of thinking, well, we got to do this, and the only way we can do it is to push and shove, and in spite of damage. Now, the thing is that we wanted you to try, and there would have been we always have a law that says we stop at the point of security or damage. We intervene at that point. Someone has to say this is getting hurt or damage is happening. And we wouldn't have minded at all if Dan Soda called back and said, well, we really tried and we really thought we could get it in for a little while, and we've done what we could, but would you have us try more? Now that would have been the right thing to say, not we can't get it in. Would you have us try more? And then Lynx would say, well, let's see, you've spent X amount of time on it. You haven't succeeded. What is still not in that you want in? And then Lynx would make the decision on what to do at that point. But you don't call and say we couldn't get it in. The right thing to do would say we haven't succeeded at this point. Would you have us go more? And it would be smart if you can check with Lynx before you've taken half a day trying. Because Lynx might have had no intention for you to take more than 30 minutes trying to get those things in there. But the lesson might have been, can you work together? Are you going to throw your own ideas in? I bet all of you in the process presented your ideas on maybe this should come out and that should go in, or maybe if we move this over here, and I bet chaos reigned.
That's tragedy,
And I bet if damage is done, damage happens because chaos reigns. And in that instance, Dan Sodi was a stand-in for an older member. And you were to do what he asked you to do, even if he asked you, what do you think about this? Do you follow what we're saying? But beyond that, you cannot solicit any ideas or suggestions. Or you just, suddenly Dan Sodi's mind recedes and might as well sit down and say, well, throw the things in the way you want to throw them. Because that's what it amounts to. Even though you probably disciplined yourself not to say things like that. And so you pretend to all be very nicely working together. Now, I'm exaggerating, but that's what goes on. That's what goes on as you as crews try to work together a lot. As you don't know how to handle the circumstance because people are already out of hand. And you don't feel it's right, because it isn't. It isn't right for Dan Sodi to say, now, wait a minute. I didn't ask your help. Because he can't play that role. Do you see what we're saying? But he would have had, in a sense, the right to do it. But he does not trust that he's seeing it right, which is right for him to do, not to trust that he's seeing it right. Now, Dan Sodi took the higher side and thought everybody, he didn't give this evaluation that I'm giving to you. He felt like everybody was really trying to be helpful. And so that's when I began to pump questions. Did they offer unsolicited answers, suggestions? Did they have ideas about what could be taken out and other things put in? What did you think you should do? Just try to add what you could add with as little shifting as possible? Yes, that's what I wanted to do. Because that's the idea that Lynx gave to him to do. But that wasn't the ideas that were coming from his helpers. Now, the reason we are making such a big issue over this is because it is a big issue with you. And not one of you are immune to it. And it happens many, many times a day. In everything that you do. And it's a major thing that needs attention. And when it gets conquered, peace will reign. Martha?
Just wanted to bring up that one thing you're saying is really, I just see my autograph pass. This happens all the time that you're describing. And I just kind of go into a state of, I don't know where I'm at, not half the time, but a lot of times I find myself, I can't think. Right, and
Well,
I
you
just
can't.
get really confused.
That's right. Your next level mind moves out. Says, I'm sorry, I'm not going to stay in this house with this much confusion.
And I just have to put my vehicle in automatic and just do things, just so I can keep going until it starts. And when I get everybody out of the house, I send this person there and that person there.
So you can get something done.
And I can get something done. But what you said, it's given me a lot of ideas in the right way to try and maybe straighten it out. I've been working on this kind of thing that you're talking about, but try another track and try to get them thinking in those terms subconsciously without them knowing that I'm trying to get them to think that way.
Right. But you all don't know how aggressive you are when you think you're even being gentle. For me to be on a crew with Jan Odie when Jan Odie is the primary, and for me to say, would you have me do this, is totally aggressive. It's almost violent. I mean that. It's almost violent. Because Jan Odie's mind would have the right at that point to just almost throw up her arms and say, goodness, I was trying to serve in a primary role, and I was hoping that you would serve in a secondary, but you can't say that. But that's what her next level mind is thinking. And it's just, we know that half the tasks that you do could be accomplished in a third the time because of this very element. This very element. You don't make things speedy by people offering suggestions and diving in and doing it. You make things speedy by letting everything zero down to the channel of those who are responsible for the task, whether it be the primary or who has that task of cereal or who has that task in the fiber lab, and what role do they play in that. And if there is nobody assigned to it, then that one channel can come down between you as one mind. If you're working as check partners and you have no axe to grind and no strong opinion on how it should be done, it will go very swiftly and right. The moment your opinion comes in on how it should be done, even though you enter it in or you slip it in subtly, you have destroyed the task.
Another thing is, when you, let's use cereal for an example, and you're preparing the cereal, and you say to your check partner, I think this cereal's right, don't you? Already you have voiced your opinion, and the other person has no...
What can they say? No, I don't.
I'm afraid it needs to be cooked a little bit longer. And then they're voicing their opinion. In other words, you've got to put the person, you have to always be looking for their suggestions, honestly, or their opinions. And you want to avoid making statements. Yesterday, when we, was it yesterday we were over here?
Mm-hmm.
When we were looking, Jan Odie and Sarah Odie, I think, and some of them were in the front looking at the material on the chairs. And I thought at first I didn't like it. And then I thought, well, I want to ask Joe what he thinks. But when I asked him, I made the mistake of saying, I'm not so sure that looks very good on the chair. In other words, I was telling him what I thought. I know how his nose works. And he would want to agree with me by my saying it in that way. You see what I'm saying?
And it was hard for me to really give my opinion once I knew that he had one, even though she tried to make it clear to me that she really didn't have it. It was just said the wrong way.
I tried to get out of it. But the point I'm getting at is it would have placed him in a predicament. And what's so strange is I feel like those ideas about things lots of times are better than mine. And it turned out right because he liked those chairs. I mean the cover on the chairs.
Well, it seems that way today. Next week we may.
And it turned out to be right. And so I had very little confidence in my ideas on things like that. And
which is good. That's the healthiest thing that you can say, because that's the way you should have, is very little confidence on the things that you do, and whatever they are. Have very little confidence. That's the way you're going to work well together. When you've got a lot of confidence in your own vehicle and your own judgment and your own mind, it's conflict, because all you have to do is come across someone else who is honestly trying to help with how that should be done, and they're up against the wall already because you have confidence that is asserting itself with an opinion.
I was wondering, when something like that happens, or say that as soon as you said that, you realize that, I influenced it. Like I know that happens with sister, you go a lot, like I'll say something and then I'll realize, it's almost instantaneously when it comes out, my mind will realize that I wish I didn't say it that way because I know it's not what I really mean.
okay, you know what I said yesterday? As soon as it came out, I said, oh, I didn't want to say
No,
that.
T let me know right away that she didn't want me to go with her, just because she had said that. That she really wanted me to think about it and see what I thought about it.
I didn't want to give my opinion. And I said, oh, I didn't want to give my opinion. I wanted to see what you thought.
Now, since T was actually asking me to express my opinion and had made it clear that that she didn't want me to be influenced by what she had said, I felt obligated to have an opinion about it. Even though, if you remember, as soon as I expressed it, I didn't trust it. And I came back and said, well, I don't know, since you're hesitant about it. And I wasn't playing a game. I meant it. Can you see how that works?
So anytime you have a response like that, very quickly come back and say, I didn't mean that the way it sounded, or whatever it is, whatever it takes to get out of it. Even if you say, I really want your opinion, or I do want to know what you think, or how you feel about it. If you all, you don't have to say, oh, I'm sorry, because you hear that in the human world all the time. But admit your mistake.
Surface it, so that they know that you wish you hadn't done it, because then it opens the door to the right kind of action.
And it doesn't make you, it isn't sickening to be that way. You know what I mean? You don't get tired of it, because over a period of time you learn to appreciate the fact that the vibrations are much better. Maybe some of you all thrive on bad vibrations. I know personally, and I can speak for God, we can't thrive on bad vibrations.
Can't even stand the vibrations of my own vehicle.
Even the thought of them sometimes, we can't hardly stand. And so we hope that you all will get to feel the same way. It will happen.
There's a situation that I think falls along with what you talked about, creating like that. I guess of all the things I've ever heard humans talk about, it's how they can't communicate their ideas. This person has these preferences and wants to do it their way, and I have mine, and these are my choices, and the whole team. And lately, when the quality control inspector, as she goes around looking at everybody's work, she, for some reason, will always stop at my bench and kind of spill her troubles out about how she feels like the quality is being overlooked, and she can't seem to impress upon other people the value of doing things in the right way, which I think she's conscientious, and she can't stand the vibrations in the place, because a lot of people use very foul language and argue with one another. Just
Okay, I've got to stop you, because if you have a question to ask, you ought to ask it, because we don't want to just tell our experiences that validate this, because everybody could help, and we really want to get to the questions. But if you have questions,
I would like to know how I can answer her, what I can do to say to her that will either help her or help let her know that I don't want to be a party to any kind of gossip or anything that she might want to do.
Well, there's not much you can say, but what you can think. And this goes for our Cody also, and anybody else who has something you want to correct at your work. It doesn't mean that you will direct something at an individual, but you can certainly leave a lot of good thoughts in there.
right. You can wish
And
for the
then,
right
as
circumstances.
individuals come in, they will pick up on those.
Right.
In other words, you can think, well, the quality is going to pick up here. And I just know that the quality of everyone's work is going to improve.
And the pettiness is going to disappear.
And foul language is going to disappear. In other words, you're kind of unconsciously setting down some rules of how you want that place to be according to the next level. And you wait and see, it'll start changing. But you can't direct it at the lady who comes by and think, you're not going to stop and talk to me, because then you're using
No,
witchcraft.
the only thing you can do with that person is kind of shield yourself from it, so that you're not affected by it.
Now, you can't say to that individual, you're going to be happier. You're going to see this, everybody's work in a better light, even though it's bad. because that again is directing that person's mind and you cannot do that.
That's fair, they gotta learn the lesson.
It's against the rules of the next level. Now, you can put thoughts out and make them pick up on any thoughts they want to. You gotta be careful. You wanna make
Because
sure.
your thoughts are stronger than theirs.
You can direct any show that you want to wherever you are. If you, in other words, you know, before you all moved into this place, before we take you anywhere, T and go and set up the vibration for you. In other words, we kind of think how we want everything to be. And it took us a long time to set this class up.
In other words, we deposit the thoughts of the atmosphere of the place, and the feel that if we think that it can be a place that really feels good, then we automatically think let all these thoughts out about how you can be happy here, how this can work and that can work and this can be pleasant and that can be pleasant. And if you're receptive to it, you pick up and everything feels great. Now, if you begin to destroy those and listen to the negative thoughts of your vehicle or of others' vehicles, then pretty soon the vibrations you have set up have been destroyed.
Well, I guess what kind of bothers me in these kinds of situations is, although I feel like I could be wrong, but I try to say the things that I think my teachers would have me say, but there's always an element of uncertainty about whether I've said the right thing, and so, you know, I never know if I actually did do some good, or if maybe I said something I shouldn't have said. Or
Well, I don't think you could do anything wrong unless you tell her don't stop and talk to me. I'm afraid it would make bad an enemy there, but if you, first, I don't believe any of you who have an autocrat path have any thoughts as low as any of you. Your thoughts are always more superior as far as goodness goes. It might not be intellectually better than anybody else. You see what I'm saying?
But of more next level ways, it's much stronger.
And even if you don't say the right thing, like what comes out of your mouth may not be the right thing, 9 times out of 10 you have thought the right thing. And the thought really is more important than what comes out of your mouth.
That's right.
Because the thought goes out more into the ether, and it affects more than just that one individual person. It affects everybody who comes around you or in the room. And before you know it, the thoughts are so thick in there, good thoughts, if you think good thoughts, that and it gradually pushes the bad thoughts out of the way. Remember, positive is always more dominant than negative. These are positive thoughts. And you don't even have to do it with any effort at all. In other words, you don't have to shoot them out and expect them to explode like a Roman candle. You can just think it. And just that thought. And sometimes while you're working, you can think something. If somebody says lets out a stream of bad languages or bad words, and you think, gee, I wish they wouldn't talk like that. That's a good thought. Or if you see somebody being rude to somebody and you think, gee, I wish they wouldn't act like that. And that person is so bad, it's so rude. They really ought to be nice to their practice, to their workers.
but that's not directly on that particular person.
No, you're putting it.
Even though it was just one person who did it.
Because you're not saying to that person, you're feeling good.
Or you're not saying you're going to stop
Right.
talking like that.
You're
Actually, you're saying more to yourself. You're just putting the thought out.
Right.
Goodness, I wish I didn't have to hear language like that. You see what I'm saying? And I wish they didn't have to, in a sense, you're wishing well for them. I wish that she didn't have to be in that vibration like that. You're not actually trying to direct your mind. Pagoda, you've had your hand up several times. Before we leave, I want to get your question.
Well, I was just wondering I guess it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago when you first brought in the furniture, and I was helping you arrange it in the front room. You were putting it here, putting it there, first one thing another, then after you're all sorted through, he says, do you have any suggestions? In my mind at that time, one of the few times that I had been able to keep quiet, I didn't have my mind blank. I didn't have any at all. And I kind of felt like, well, maybe you expected one from me.
No, just wanted to see.
You
And,
might have
well,
liked it.
if I had, would it have been then kind of jumping the gun, which I shouldn't have been doing in the first place?
No, you could not, you wouldn't be jumping the gun if I had asked you, and if you hadn't let that thought out prior. The way you've got to look at it is if you're working with an older member and they're putting the furniture out, and helping arrange the furniture, what you want to do is you want to arrange that room the way that older member wants to arrange it.
Right.
You don't want to let any thought come in of how I would arrange this room.
Right.
Now, if when the older member gets through, he says, do you have any thoughts about this arrangement, or can you see anything that we might want to change? He's really asking you. And if you then open up your computer, which you kept shut until that moment, you open it up and say, okay, here's your chance. Here's your chance because you've been asked. And I dare say that if it had been something that you were more familiar or had done more frequently than arranged furniture, it's probably been a long time in your computer hadn't thought arranged furniture type thoughts for so long that when it was invited to it, just had nothing to say. And,
Well, let me tell you what, let me interrupt you,
Okay.
because let me tell you what happened. I use T as an example, okay? When we knew the furniture was over here, so I knew Joe's mind was working on how to put the furniture around in the room. I didn't even allow my vehicle to think of it, because I knew that he was thinking.
would pick up on those thoughts.
And I was coming over here to help Joe put the furniture the way he had worked it out.
In other words,
Yeah.
he was like saying, I would like for this to be your task,
Right.
and I don't want to interfere with it. So the only way I can not interfere with it is to not think about it.
Because if I thought about it, then if it didn't agree with him, then there would be conflict.
Now, if it was something other than arranging furniture, that it had some moral to it, or it had some right or wrong of some significance, it's a different story altogether.
Now, when, I don't know if I helped him with this, but this has happened in other circumstances. Now, if I did go in there and help him, I wouldn't have any thought about where to put a chair, or to put a couch, or put a table, or whatever. But after he put it around, and he asked me, like he was in like he couldn't decide where to put the things, and he put them just where he thought it would be okay, but he didn't feel like it was exactly the way he wanted it.
Well, there's really more to it than that, because,
Well, let me finish.
okay.
And he asked me what I thought. I really wouldn't have any idea until I stopped to think. And I looked around the room to see, well, could I improve upon it? Or I could say, well, it looks okay to me. Now, the reason you didn't have a thought was probably because, like you said, the one time you were going along with what Joe was doing, and you didn't think, well, shall I put this chair over here, or shall I put this table over here? You know what I'm saying? And what you could have done was look around the room and see if you thought anything did need to be changed. But if you thought it looked okay, you could say, well, it looks okay to me.
Well, I felt like he actually asked his mind when I asked him.
Right.
I think he actually asked and had nothing to say,
It
had
was
nothing to
okay.
offer. And it was disappointing me that you had nothing to offer. Now, I've got to go back to what T said, though, on that room in there, because even though T asked me to take the task, I still wanted the task to please T. Even if I had in my thoughts on how to do it a couple of ideas that were different, I would rather sacrifice those ideas and have it please T, because they aren't important to me to stick to. I don't know if you can understand. It's far more important to me that T like it. Can you see the way that has to work? And you've got to check yourself when you're working.
T as an older member,
Yes,
not
that's right. It's not T as a human or T as a person. But what I hoped that I could do would be come up with something that T liked and that seemed satisfying. And that's the reason I would go periodically and say, would you come and check me out on this? And I would be disappointed if T was not telling me what she thought about it when I checked. And T would tell me what she thought about it. But where T stayed out was, as the pieces were falling together, she didn't want to say, let's put this here, let's try this there, because she wanted me to do the task. And she knew if she even had those thoughts in the early stages, that it would confuse me. And I would be picking up on those thoughts and not to know how to proceed. You see what we're saying? You've got to stay out when you're in a circumstance like this. Just like, well, we could, I don't want to go over and repeat the whole discussion with that. Turn on that light back there.
Great, and turn the light on. We don't know if you are sleeping through this. Yeah, we could even be asleep.
Just on tape. Automatic. Notice?
When Liz comes over and they're walking through the craft, and it's like everybody in the craft is in a little group following around. So
Glad you brought that
they're
up.
not supposed to do
You're not supposed to. Glad you brought that up, because you are not supposed to. You're not even supposed to. Sat 3 is not to migrate to Sat 3 to see if T's in there speaking to someone. You really interfere. If T wants to speak to Sat 3 or individuals, T will solicit their presence there. And as we go through the craft, what you do is go on about your business. And if we ask you to participate in something that we want you to participate in, that's when you give us your attention. Other than that, you just, as we pass through, nothing wrong with glancing, and by your look on your face, we can tell that you're glad to see us, and you know by the look on our face that we're glad to see you, and we're glad to see that you're going right on about your business. Okay? And that's the way it needs to remain. Shirley?
When you're working with an older member, is it right to try and figure out why, like if you're working on tasks and you're trying to do something, the older member says do this and do this, is it right to try and figure out why he's doing this, or is it best just do this?
It's best to just observe it and make a mental note of this was their choice. Because I don't think you would ever come up with the right answer on trying to figure out why.
Okay.
Sounds good?
I can remember some times that, I don't know if this is right, like, for instance, my toe would come in and there were one crack and he'd start looking at you.
I'm sorry?
You could come into a room and just look, and you have that look on your face, and you might pay something off, and then you go back upstairs. And immediately, what I want to do is I want to know, what is he thinking about? What is he trying to figure out? And because I wanted to know what the next step is. What is he going to, what next kind of arrangement are we going to have in the craft? And always enjoy doing that, but is that a wrong?
Yes, it is. Yeah, the blind in the lab there. Yes, as soon as you realize that your brain is starting to exercise its curiosity about what Doe is doing, then you ought to say, stay out of it. If it is something you need to know, you'll know about it when the right time comes. And it's very important that all of you exercise this, because you can interfere just in your curiosity and in your wondering, as you put out thoughts, I wonder if it's going to be so-and-so, or I wonder if it's going to be so-and-so. You also set yourself up for trouble, because you might be expecting something and then it doesn't happen. And it's best, the minute you hear the curiosity of your vehicle's brain wondering what's going on, to just shut it off and say, I know if I'm to know about it, that I'll know at the right time. And you shouldn't feel cheated. You're not being cheated of anything. Because if there was anything that you needed to know or was right for you to know, you will know at the right time. But until that time, you're an interferer with your thoughts. Because as your thoughts are thinking all those thoughts, you might as well be voicing them. Doe, what are you doing with that measuring tape? Why are you facing that off? Are you going to bring something in here? Or are you going to wait and bring something else there? What are you doing? Because that's what you're doing mentally.
Another example would be something I do is like when we were still in Austin one day, we were all South Class and semi-3 announced that we got a new car and it's a red Ford and that's all we're going to tell you. And it's a new one. And so I was going to retreat and the whole way up there I kept running through my mind, what are all the 84 four-doors that are red that they could have, and I could only come up with one car. This is an LTD from Victoria, and that's what it was.
Oh, come on, that's not four-door red.
Well, it's the only one that they made, because I had seen a commercial a couple of weeks ago, and I was figuring out that it said this is the only big car that was
Full size.
full size.
Right.
Is that wrong?
Yes.
Trying to figure that
Yes. It's wrong. And we hate to tell you this, but it is wrong. Because you shouldn't, it's waste of your energy, really. And it shouldn't be important to you. And don't play games with yourself, because you can set yourself up for the same thing we mentioned a moment ago. You can be disappointed if it isn't what you figured out or hoped it would be. And you'll know about it in the right time. And it just sets yourself up. Plus it puts thoughts out. So, but this is, I'm glad you brought that up, just like I'm glad Glenn Odie brought up this traipsing around after links when they come out. Because he and I leave here and say, next time we get over there, we're going to tell them not to do that to it. And Glenn Odie picked up on that stuff. All right, Odie?
On the topic of, like Link said, you can do whatever you'd like to do. And you can go here, you can go there. And then Link comes back because they're thinking, trying to help an individual find out what they need to do. Just, in my mind, you're just saying, well, you could do this. You know, as if to say, well, this is an idea, you might try this if you're having difficulty trying something else. When Link says that, is it the most right thing to do to go ahead and do what the older member has suggested? Or how can you tell?
That's a good question. You can't. It just, trial and error. But let's say when Link says, I want you to go ahead and do it the way you want to do it. Well, let's take retreat, for example. We have said for retreat to come up with some ideas. And we know we're throwing the door wide open, and we know that in the process you'll stumble all over yourself, or that there's a likelihood that you will. And it's right to throw the door open, because that's the only way we're going to find out if you would have stumbled over yourselves if the door were open. Like, for example, retreat came up with the thought of going someplace, and we might go swimming. Which in Link's mind, with you having a big pool out in the backyard of your own craft, it's foolish to go think about swimming someplace else. So, but you wouldn't have known that had we not opened the door, and had you not come up with that thought, so we could teach you that that kind of thinking is inappropriate for you to think along those lines. Now, let's say you do open the door. That really puts you on the spot, in a way. No, let's say that Link opens the door for your idea. That puts you on the spot, because then you start saying, uh-oh, I want to come up with only the ideas that would be to their approval, right? And so, and that's the way you should be. You want to to think very carefully and think to yourself, would it seem strange to Lynx if we came up with an idea of swimming? In other words, if you had thought this out, right, we feel like that swimming idea would have never reached us if they had really thought of that properly. But maybe by not wanting to offend the ones within the retreat group, the ones who might have mentioned it first, now the others not wanting to offend them, they thought, well, we'll let Lynx offend them. By bringing it up. We know that happens a lot. But you have to be very cautious when we open the door to you. Now that does not mean that we have a pre-notion of what we want you to do and that your test is coming up with it. It does not mean that at all. When we open the door to you, there are usually lots of options that would all be right and lots of options that would be less than right. And your test is, can I stay confined to the ones that are more right?